Okay, so you're all very welcome to the Mind Over Mountains podcast, where we talk to business leaders about how they've coped professionally and personally with what's gone on over the last nearly year and a half now, really, with COVID. It's been such a seismic shift, really, and change in how people do business and live their lives. So this podcast really gets to the depth and core of how we've coped with that. Personally, really. I have a panel of guests here with me today. I have Kenneth Carroll from Carroll Foods. I have Declan.bourke from Sports Endorse. I have Dmitry Lazarev from CIS Force. I have Fionan Murphy from the startup.com, and I have Barry Moroney from Leadable. And of course, our lead guest every week is Máirtín from Mind Over Matters. And I think I'm going to start, as we do usually, Máirtín, just with yourself. And maybe if you can give us a little bit of your background, how has life been for you, both professionally and personally, over this period?
Well, it's been quite eventful, really, for the last 14 months. We had started up Mind Over Mountains about a year and a half ago, and with a lot of emphasis in the beginning on life coaching and getting people out in the outdoors and getting them, to try and rebalance their lives a little bit. But I had a health scare myself about 13 months ago, where I had 4 stents put in, and it came as a complete shock, because I looked as good today, or I looked as good when that happened as I do today. So I was just very proactive. I decided to go and get some tests done, and it showed up that I had difficulties. And I'm told that it came from a very stressful time I went through a couple of years ago, when I lost 2 businesses that I was running in the last crash. But just to keep it, I suppose, relevant, the last 14, 15 months have been, it's been difficult, because we had started up Mind Over Mountains, as I said. I had to deal with my own health issue. And we had started to roll out a couple of different programs at Mind Over Mountains, and there's one in particular that had begun to gather a lot of momentum, and it's we called it Summit Leaders. And we had to change the course of how we were presenting that. We had to go online, so that created its own difficulties. But we got through it, and we've been successful with it, and that's where we are at the moment.
Okay. And maybe for our listeners who don't understand Mind Over Mountains or Summit Leaders, just if you can briefly explain what does Summit Leaders mean? What was that?
Well, Summit Leaders is it's a program, as I said, rolled out by Mind Over Mountains, where we bring 7 business people together, business leaders, in groups, and we're very mindful of the groups that people come from different sectors, so there's a bit of variety. And what we do then is we get people to align their goals. We facilitate the whole thing. We meet once a month. It's been on Zoom, and we plan to meet at least 3 times during the year physically then. We focus on 3 key areas in particular: business, family, and health and well-being. And we encourage people where they challenge themselves and they push their boundaries, and working within the group, they're constantly in contact with one another. And then I'm facilitating and keeping an eye on everybody and making sure that they're keeping to their goals. And we find it's been very successful for us up to now.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Listen, before I turn to the panel, and we'll be getting their feedback on the year. There's one particular point we want to look at today, Máirtín, which is balance and maintaining a balance over. I suppose it's been really difficult for people to maintain a balance over the last year, especially. But before we get into any tips on how or whatever, but what do you mean by maintaining a balance over the year?
Well, as a businessman who ran multi-million-pound businesses in the 80s and 90s and beginning of the noughties, I know what it's like to be at cold face. And I think in the last year and a half, particularly, people have been have been really trying to find ways, you know, to cope with what's going on and to manage their businesses and manage their employees. And sometimes at the detriment of managing themselves. And I know I was that person myself. I was talking to a guy who's going to be on, I think, the next podcast, and he made some very interesting points to me. He runs his own business in Armagh. And he just said to me, he said, at times like this, he said, you become more of a workaholic than ever because you just focus on the part of your life that's earning your money, keeping your family. And it's where you really want to make sure that you're not missing out on anything. But sometimes that balance can be really out of kilter, that your relationship with your family, with your friends, and your health and well-being is all over the place. So what I try to do, especially with some leaders, is get people to have a look at their overall balance and see exactly where they're at. And that's what I mean by balance. It's an overall look at your life. It's a helicopter view of your life. Look down, see where you're putting all the effort and see what's suffering as a result of that.
Okay. And has it been your experience that business people have maybe suffered in terms of working too much over this last year or so, or maybe working too little? I don't know. What has been your experience on it?
Well, it's changed, I think. In the first 7 or 8 months of this, I think people were really, really shoulder to the wheel, and there was a lot of nervousness, and people were not sure were they going to survive, how they had to adapt their businesses and so on. But I think specifically with what we've been getting feedback from people, from summit leaders, from other courses that we're running within MindOverMountains, that there is a real attention being paid now to health and well-being and trying to improve that balance. And I think that's a lesson that's coming out of this that people have learned. So that's what we found in answer to your question.
Okay, thanks. So that's very interesting. I'm looking forward now to throwing it over to the panel. And before I do start getting into any meaty discussion on tips on what you business leaders can give to others over learnings from COVID time. First of all, let's hear a little bit about the background of each of you. And I'll start with you, Kenneth, from Carroll Food Services. So Kenneth, tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and how you've been both professionally and personally over the last year.
Yeah, thanks, Breandán, and thanks for the opportunity today. It's great. My business I started back in 1994. My parents having been in the same sector since the late 60s, in basically workplace catering, staff restaurants, hospital catering, nursing homes and schools, and some leisure sector as well. And so we sold that in 92. I started again from scratch, from a zero base in 94, and built it up. And the last crash, I was thinking back, you know, it took a huge toll on the business, and we lost 70–80% of our business, and we'd nearly got back to where we had been. And then this happens. But we have a broad brush, broad sectoral representation in contract catering and looking after food services. And we were lucky in that, you know, I suppose we have about 30% of our business still open. And I see that as a positive because it actually kept us focused on staying open in those sites. But quite a few closed, and we're not sure if they're going to reopen again for various reasons. And some of which, you know, is the hybrid version of working now in the workplace. That's for the workplace catering. But we were very lucky to be represented in the pharmaceutical sector, which stayed open right through, and residential care facilities. And they were open. And we have one school as well, so that stayed open right through. Mm-hmm. So I suppose that's what we do. We have a long heritage in the business. The last year has been, you know, pretty tough in that my father, who's chairman of the business, got very ill last year and died in November.
Sorry.
And thank you. And he was 89, but he was as interested in the business, as engaged in the business, and as sharp as a tack. Still looked at the figures and so forth and so on up to that age. and he's a great loss. But we also took the opportunity to try and look at other things that we could do as a business, and we stepped back and said, well, what business are we in? We're in the food business, in providing services, and we developed a suite of services for small business who are returning to work, for business who are returning to work, a meal plan where we could deliver in rather than open up their staff restaurants. And we're now moving to trial on a delivered service because of the issues, some of the issues that I had around Dad's meal planning. I developed a new service in conjunction with a home care company, and that we would offer a value-added service for them and in delivering meals, and we're putting that to trial now in the next few weeks. So that's positive.
Yeah, yeah. So that there's what I'm getting from you in a way, Kenneth, is it's been a year where you've experienced loss, huge change, but huge adaptability and versatility and new ideas coming forward as well. Would that be fair?
That's right. That's fair. That's fair. And the other side of it is we try to keep up the contact with all our the people who are working for us, and many of whom are still out on layoff, which is very difficult. And only last Friday was Corporate Wellness Day, and we had a Zoom cup of coffee for all of the guys who wanted to sit in on it. But the engagement, you can see the engagement that little bit more difficult now because people are a bit more demoralized. They're looking forward to getting back, but they're not sure if they're going to get back. And so you have to manage that and keep in touch and keep the sense of spirit alive and moving.
Very important. Let me go to you, Declan.bourke of Sports Endorse. Sports Endorse has come on my radar a couple of times recently through LinkedIn and that, and I find it very interesting. Can you give us a little bit of the background, Declan, and how the last year has been for you? You're on mute just at the moment, Declan. Yeah.
One sec.
We've got you there. Yeah, we've got you.
Okay.
There.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so Sport Endorse basically is we're trying to do sports management in a different way and kind of revolutionize how that is. So we built a platform to enable this, and timing being everything in life, our platform was due to go live summer of last year. Sport kind of didn't exist in summer of last year. So anyway, we pushed it. We focused on making the platform that bit better. And we eventually launched the platform in November of 2020. So plenty of challenge. I mean, if you look at 2020, 65% of the revenue we did was in the last 3 months. And I put that down to the single word of vaccine. Yeah. And that gave hope. Yeah. Thankfully, today, things are going a lot better. As to, did that freak us out? A little bit, but in terms of my own history so far, the first job, I went to university in Galway and I left and I went to Japan and I joined a startup, an Irish startup in Tokyo, and I had to try and grow that when Japan was sliding or had slid into recession, and had gone during the time I was there from the second largest economy in the world to the third largest. I then came home to Ireland in late 2006. And at the end of 2007 was opening up a financial services office in Ireland for a UK firm. And in early 2008, we had the nice big crash. So another deep dive into misery. And so it's kind of, I don't know if I'm cursed or something, but every time I seem to start something new, all hell breaks loose in whatever market or part of the world I am.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate, certainly in Sport Endorse, in the context that my business partner, Trevor Twomley, is a Tralee man. So I'm sure Kerry people are infinitely positive all the time. So,
yeah.
You know, we managed to bounce stuff off each other and have kept things going. Yeah.
It's gaining traction for you, isn't it? Sports Endorse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess one of the positives in a perverse way about the back end of last year from a sport perspective was certainly a lot of the athletes had more time on their hands than they might have liked, which gave them opportunity to explore. from a brand's perspective, because it's essentially a marketplace which stitches brands and athletes together. There was a lot of interest, but not a lot of activity, because of course, are you going to turn on your marketing spend again or not? I mean, even today, we run into tentative usage, which is still usage, thank God, but basically it's not, the tap is still definitely not turned back on. So it's, you know, it's constantly challenging, but there is activity. And, you know, I mean, adapt, I guess. On the point of balance, which is part of the theme for today, one of the things I've found is, I mean, with all the constant lockdowns, you know, you're a prisoner in your own home, essentially. So that's led to me, for the first time in years, getting fit again, because I was going insane in the house. So I got out running, and I, you know, did a bit more with myself. So I actually feel that coming out of this, my hope is if I can maintain it, I'm going to wind up with a much greater balance in my life. I see a hell of a lot more of my kids than I did when I was going into an office every day. You know, you're pushing a startup or a company. When you're at the top end of that, as we all know, you know, there's never enough hours in the day. So it's about prioritizing, and, you know, you can call that a privilege, but I now understand it, for me anyway, as a necessity. So basically box things off appropriately.
That's good. So it's made you fit again. It's making me fat again, by the way. But it's good to hear that it's making somebody fit again. Let me go over to Barry now. Barry Moroney of Leadable. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, Barry, and about Leadable, and then how the year has affected you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm in Adair County, Limerick. Living in Spain right now. I had been living in Dubai for 8 years, started the business there, and kind of in the slow transition of moving back to Ireland. I think Dubai to Ireland would have been too much of a culture shock. I needed kind of a halfway point in between. So I'll be looking forward to doing that later this year. Leadable as a business is still a new business. We're less than 2 years old. We're celebrating our second birthday next month. What we really try to do is help a certain type of company attract larger enterprise clients as new customers. The kind of outsourced sales development space is obviously a very crowded space. There's, you know, probably 5,000 plus companies globally. But I felt a couple of years ago, based on my own experience, both kind of trying to run sales teams and outsourcing the function in the past, that there was a certain type of company, namely ones with much larger contract values and maybe smaller markets who weren't really being served by the market or by the model that was out there. So what we do is we run very low volume campaigns. We work with clients who have larger contract values, and they have maybe a smaller total addressable market where they say there's, you know, X number, maybe 500, 600, 700 companies globally total that they can work with, and they don't want to waste them. So they want to give them the most love they possibly can in all of the outreach, the most deep research and personalization, etc. And resources typically don't allow to do that internally. It's just too time consuming. If you've got full sales cycle reps, you know, they can manage a pipeline and try to get deals to the finish line. And they can probably run automated sales campaigns at the same time, but they probably can't do personalized, proper quality outreach at the same time. So we look to do that. As I said, nearly 2 years old. The business is fully remote, was fully remote kind of from the outset. So COVID didn't really change anything for us there. COVID came at I suppose we were about 9 months old when it hit first, and we were just starting to get traction, just starting to kind of move beyond a point of where it was just kind of, you know, trying to manage a couple of clients, getting to the stage where it's like, okay, try to bring on more clients now and build a business out of it. COVID hit, then I think we only had 5 clients at the time, but 4 of them left like immediately when the news hit. So there was a little bit of stress around that, thinking, okay, how are we going to do this? But the beauty of outbound sales, obviously, is you can be very proactive. That's what it is. It's proactive sales. So we were able to look at, okay, what are the industries that are actually going to thrive off the back of this? So we looked at any company who did anything at all with remote work in any way, and we ran really targeted campaigns to them. Built up a few clients in the past year, then has just been purely about growth. You know, we were 1 employee this time last year. There's 15 of us now across 10 different countries, about 15 hours of time zone. So yeah, the biggest challenge really has been around that. And I know I'm very fortunate in this position that it's been a very tough year for a lot of businesses. Thankfully, from our perspective, as you know, Declan said in maybe a perverse way, if anything, maybe it was maybe beneficial for the business, because I think a lot of companies still need sales, always going to need sales, and maybe looking to outsource wherever possible to keep maybe fixed costs down. And maybe that's been, and I think the idea of a remote company, the field has been leveled completely. If you've got a big shiny office in London, or you're working from home, it's irrelevant now. It doesn't matter anymore, and I think it's more of a meritocracy in that respect. So that's been good, I think.
Okay, that's great. It's a great story. I mean, it's remarkable growth in a year like we've had. So it's a wonderful story to hear, and I think it's refreshing for all of us to hear that, really. Dmitry, let's talk to Dmitry. Dmitry, your company is CIS Force, and we're going now from Spain to Russia, because you're talking to us from Russia, Dmitry. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and how the past year has been for you?
Actually, CIS Force was founded in Galway about 3 years ago, and I moved to Galway in 2015 and spent a few years there. So I'm in Russia for a very limited period of time. And CIS Force, it is IT freelance platform with zero time waste. It means that we save time for both IT freelancers like developers or designers and our customers, who are most likely startups or studios from Europe and United States. Also now, I think we are going to have a few clients from Canada as well. And we save time because we have very detailed verification for freelancers, which includes interviews, test tasks, and trial projects before we make them available. So really, we save a lot of time for both companies and IT freelancers, and help to match them using our algorithms. So that's just a few words about our business. And as similar to Barry, our business was remote from day one. So the biggest challenge, I think, was before the COVID, because before the COVID, someone might not took seriously, the fact that you are working fully remotely, the fact that you're trying to talk to the customer over video, the fact that you don't have actually a personal meeting with them. Of course, there were people who are open to it, but there were part of the people were kind of skeptical about this way of doing things. Yeah. And now it is just normal. So actually COVID, I think brought a lot of positive thing to the market, because people, I mean for remote companies, because people are now prepared to do business like this.
Yes.
So that's a positive thing. So our whole team was remote. We have nearly 500 freelancers from all over the world, but primarily from Eastern Europe and Russia, but also from Europe and United States a little bit. And our internal team also remote. And I guess, yeah, as I said, I spent 1.5 years in Bali, so there were not really a lockdown in Bali. So I can only imagine how it is struggling to have everything, all pubs closed and everything closed. In Bali, the only thing was just that there are much less tourists, which is a positive thing for us, but not for local people, of course.
Yes.
But yeah. So,
well, let me tell you, Dmitry, having the pubs closed for this past year or more, it's been tough.
Yes, I can't imagine this. But yeah, as I said, I spent 1.5 years in Bali, and I just going to come back to Ireland. Hopefully, it will improve and lockdown will be softened a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully.
That's it. I only came back to Russia to get COVID after 1.5 years. So before that, for some strange reason, I couldn't get it.
Well, thanks a million. So that's two great stories, really, of companies that were remote ready and took advantage of it. Let me now turn to Fionan Murphy. And Fionan, you're from the startup.com. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the business, and then how the year has been for you.
Sure, and thanks for having me on. So my background over the last 20 years has been customer experience in telecoms. So I've worked for Vodafone, Three, and startup in the UK, and all about trying to reduce customer effort, while retaining customer sentiment or positive sentiment about the brand. So what we're doing with the startup.com is kind of looking at that from an entrepreneur's point of view. So our mission is really to reduce needless effort for entrepreneurs and connect them with resources that they don't know are available to them, connect them with resources or mentorship that can help them in a single platform. So that's the startup.com. So people come in, they do an assessment, and then we recommend next steps for them, just to try and demystify the entrepreneurial journey, or some of it. I mean, when you're starting out, it's very hard to find out about all this stuff and then run the business as well. And so that's from the entrepreneur perspective. And then we also built a platform which we sell to other entrepreneurial ecosystems, be they educational or incubatory, in Ireland and in the US primarily. And so, yeah, the year has been crazy, I think, for everyone. I think at the start of March, it was like people just kind of didn't, like last year, didn't want to really do anything. I felt like people were like, let's see what happens. And that seemed to just go on and on. And I think towards the end of last year, people were starting to do more things. They were open to, deliver projects. But I think from our point of view, like everybody else, COVID has actually been quite good, because if we're talking to entrepreneurial ecosystem managers, generally these programs would be in a location, they'd be in a building. And with COVID, they realized, well, we have to do this virtually. And generally they had a hodgepodge of tools that they would be using to try and do these things virtually, but it wasn't a platform dedicated to deliver on this use case. So I think that digital transformation that's happened globally is now making people much more accepting of doing things online. So, our team grew as well over the year. I haven't physically met most of the team, which is quite weird. But then we've got, resources in Austin, Texas. We've resources in Honduras. We've resource in India, resource in Boston, and we're all getting together online. So it's interesting to be global so quickly, or at least, notionally, where we have these resources around. So I think that's been really interesting. But on a balance point of view, I'm kind of between yourself and Declan, between going up and down. And I was out walking for a while, and then, things get busy and then you forget to do that. But I think, it's just such a critical thing to have that balance of, doing things. I was reading about some crazy stuff like, that fake commute, where you do a commute in the morning just to get your headspace. Kind of going out and walking around the block to just try and, because I find that the whole thing about this is it's very on demand. So meetings everything is structured. You're reaching out to people, but you don't have that informal bumping into people, which I've always found incredibly useful and incredibly productive, because you're able to just have 2 minutes in a corridor where you decide something, or in the canteen, those kind of things. We never really had a big office. We used to have an office, and we would meet there a couple of times a week, but I thought even that was really useful. So I'm looking forward to getting back to meeting people. But I wonder what is going to demand a physical meeting now. I mean, how kind of important does that meeting need to be before you would meet somebody physically? So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I know I had the experience myself as well when we had our major lockdown nearly, a year ago in March, and it went on for about a couple of months nearly, didn't it? And then the first relaxation of it, one of our clients said to me, why don't you call in to Galway for a meeting? And I'm based nearly 30 miles west of Galway. I was thinking, no way. Zoom will do us just fine. And I think the world has changed in that way for the better, Listen, thanks very much. We've heard the stories from everyone. I'm going to open it up now for the last few minutes of the podcast. And we're going to focus on maybe something that's very important from your side, Máirtín, and the type of work that you would do. So just to get feedback from everybody on just keeping mental sharpness and mental wellness in the first instance, and also that edge and the goals that you need to keep your business going and your family life going and all of that. What are the learnings? What are the little routines, the small little things that you might have picked up over the year that you would say helped you, and you would be able to go back and seriously advise other people of taking up this routine, whether it's your 30-minute walk, whether it's taking up meditation, whether it's the exercise, whatever it is. Tell me about what really helped you personally over this year. Then I'll throw it open to yourselves to come in. Maybe we start with Declan there. You were talking about fitness and exercise. Is there anything else, any routine or tip you'd be able to pass on?
Well, as I said, for me, just personally, from a business perspective, with me and the other co-founder, Trevor, we have this thing which we call Paranoid Mondays. Yeah. So basically, after the weekend, when you're back into work, it's like, that didn't happen, this didn't happen. So we make, if there's any negative thoughts, shall we say, we make sure we get rid of them all on Monday. So they're kind of tolerated on Monday, but not on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah. So it's now a joke with us, you know, and at some point, if somebody gets a bit narky on a Thursday, we're like, well, no, hang on, Paranoid Monday sneaking into Thursday, get rid of it. Yeah. And it just helps us kind of reset and look at things more objectively, really, because pretty much if you take that big picture view, which I guess, you know, most of what we're getting irritated about just isn't worth it. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not a psychologist. Having to Scooby-Doo if what I'm saying makes sense, but it's working for us. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. It's a great idea. Paranoid Mondays. What about you, Dmitry? Anything you've picked up over the last year that you'd like to pass on in that way?
Yeah, I found one challenge during this time, and maybe even before that a little bit. It's difficult to concentrate it's difficult either to relax or concentrate on work. So I either can concentrate and 100% be in the work and like not enjoy anything, or I just enjoy the life, but I'm not really efficient. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I can concentrate on the work. So I found that first of all in Bali I started to train Muay Thai, and I found that if you for example, twice a week, if you go to training and have some, you know, training and sparring, it adds, you know, and gives you some energy boost and kind of help you to either concentrate and help you to switch. Also, my wife is a yoga teacher, so sometimes I practice yoga. And when my co-founder had some problems, we also we're giving him yoga online through Zoom. So it kind of also it really helps. Yoga and meditation works just really, you know, is really strong effect. And also I once I tried to stay on nails 15 minutes. Do you know what it means?
To stand on the nails, like,
to stand,
to lie on them, would it?
No, not to lie, just to stand, but with your whole weight. So I stand for 15 minutes, which is supposed to be that after 15 minutes you don't feel the pain anymore. So I was going to check that, but I also must say that it gives you kind of a lot of energy after this. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to try, but I tried this and I think it's.
I could try them, Dmitry, if they were nailed in.
Yeah.
No, that's very good. It's a challenging tip. Barry.
And one more.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. One more thought.
Yeah.
I think one more challenge is because you are working from home. I found that sometimes it's good to go to, for example, Starbucks or some other place. It is good to change places, because I found when you go to a new place, it gives you more concentration.
Mm-hmm.
At least it helps me. And also it's important to agree with your family if you work remotely. I am still learning this. Of course, you need to have your own office, even inside the home.
You need the separate
you need
space.
to agree with your family so they understand. Yeah, you need to agree with your family so they understand that there are certain times that you are busy, and
Sure.
just to agree when you are free and when you are busy, etc.
Yeah. Ground rules. I like it. And Barry, from your point of view, tips that you'd like to give?
And nothing as drastic as stepping on nails, so don't worry about that. But I think the obvious ones, like as Declan said, exercise. Trying to keep the routine. I think ultimately all coming down to making sure that the sleep is good. So like exercise in the morning, like a nighttime routine. Try to read like fiction for at least 15 minutes as the last thing of the day, so I'm not thinking about anything maybe other than that, going to sleep. Simple things like that. But to take a step back from that, I think trying to eliminate the possibility of stress, particularly in probably the biggest challenge in like building and growing and running a team, is making sure that above all else, above competencies, above experience, anything, that everybody in the company is a values match. And that's priority number one. I'm a big believer in hire on attitude rather than aptitude, and we bring the right people into the business, even if they're not perfect for the job right now, and like it's not going to be time sensitive. They can learn it over time. But if there's the right attitude and everybody is a values fit, then there's just no aggro. There's no aggro whatsoever. We haven't had, I can't think of, actually there hasn't been one single kind of HR issue or anything along those lines. So I think that goes a long way to eliminating stress. And when it comes to things like obviously delegation, I feel everybody is a values match, so it gets done, and I don't really have to think about it. So I think trying to eliminate it first is probably the best step that I've taken this year.
Great. And Kenneth, your tips from the year?
Well, I think staying positive in the workspace was huge, and being able to come to the office was huge for me. Part of it was a requirement because the hub, it manages the different sites and so forth and so on. But reaching out to people, talking, I took the downtime with some clients to actually spend a lot of time on things like LinkedIn and networking and so forth and so on. And people, at least in the first lockdown, were very interested to hear from other people. And I think a little bit of inertia set in later on in the second and third lockdowns. But the other thing, you became more aware of your family in different ways. And like my son, who's now 15, was schooling from home for a large part of the time, and also he changed school in the middle of it all. So in working that through with him, we were always into watching movies together and watching box sets and old comedy box sets from when I was growing up and so forth and so on. And that was a point of contact for us, and some things that we were doing together is because we, in large part, we couldn't do the sports that we used to do together. So we were finding other things, and then how it was impacting on my wife at home as well. So I became more aware of that. And that was good. That was good. And that's, putting the effort in to make sure that everybody in the family is coming together, but also they're all right in their own space. I think that's very important. But positivity and, the interaction and talking and communication. And it's been very difficult for particularly people for homeschooling. I mean, the teens have been through a really tough time. And you have to take your hat off to them and the teachers who have put huge time into making sure that it's been right. I really take my hat off to the teachers and the effort that they've put in and the level of contact that they've kept up with the students. It's been super.
For sure. And Fionan, over to you now for your tips from the year.
Yeah, I think I really like Paranoid Monday, and I think probably possibility to integrate that with the standing on the nails. But like, I think as an entrepreneur, I mean, as a first-time entrepreneur, it's very up and down, and it's quite like COVID, like, some, you know, with, you know, are we going to be allowed back? Are the restrictions going to lift? Is kind of like, is that deal going to come through? Is that money going to come through? So I just think it's been fascinating living this journey for the last year and a half, and COVID being the majority of that. And what we try and do with our team is just be in regular contact. So like we have different channels, like, you know, channels that we're just being social on, and I think channels that, you know, we're using to work. But I think that the big thing that I've started to do is meet clients or partners just for a walk. And I think I'd love to keep that on. I think that's been brilliant. And it's a different type of meeting than like being confronted with somebody on Zoom, or even being in a room with somebody. I mean, apparently you're much more open when you're just walking, and, you know, you're not making eye contact or whatever it is. I think there's studies on it. I think that's been brilliant, and I've retained that, and it's just a good way to meet people. And I think having that demarcation, or at least try, it's difficult when you're starting a business to be finished at, you know, 5:30. You're kind of on all the time, and everybody kind of feels that way as well. So just trying to allow, you know, and you know, as much as possible, you know, respect people's time. And it, you know, it is a challenge though, because with all of this availability, people tend to always be available. And I know there's regulation for that, but in reality, in a startup, like, you know, you have to be always available. So that's what we're trying to do. But, you know, coming through it, and we'll see where it gets to. But I think the walking and talking has been a brilliant thing, and I think I'll continue that.
Yes. Thanks very much. Well, Máirtín, lots of interesting tips there. Are you going to bring any of those into your Summit Leaders group? Will you be asking them to stand on nails or anything like that?
Well, it's been very interesting, and I found it hugely informative and entertaining. But like, if you can envisage, guys, that with Summit Leaders, there's 5 of you there talking with myself and Breandán. There's 7 of us, but this is kind of what goes on at Summit Leaders, where, you know, we come together. There's a Zoom meeting. I'm facilitating it, but people are talking about difficulties. They're talking about awarenesses. They're talking about realizations, and there's common goals. And then we talk about, you know, what sort of a goal would you like to do? Some people want to run a marathon. Some people want to ride a bike for 100 miles. Somebody else wants to climb a mountain. Or as Fionan said there, someone just wants to go for a walk. So we try and, you know, get everybody working on different areas, and we come back the following month, 3 weeks later, and people are talking about different things. And it's great to see the variety of stuff that people are doing. And I'm thrilled. It's been brilliant, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Listen, guys, I'm really thankful. So that was a wonderful podcast. Thank you all very much.